Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bolt Report for another episode of Thunderstruck. My name is Michael Wax, joined as always with my co host Jake Ricker. Today, we have a very special guest with us. He has been with the Lightning since their first ever game in 1992, from doing intermission reports, sideline gigs, interviews, hosting, and so much more. He has become an essential part of Lightning coverage, and you will see him at intermission reports in every single game for the Lightning in their local broadcast. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Paul Kennedy.
Michael, Jake, a pleasure. I must say, your animated open was beautiful. That was
Thank you.
very impressive. Who was the creator of that, Jake?
That was
Michael,
actually
you take
something we
credit?
did on Fiverr. I went on Fiverr and had somebody
No.
help me make that. I'm not that great with technology, but
Well, it was impressive. It was impressive. We could have used that at Valley Sports. That's great. It's wonderful to join you.
You're the second person in a row to actually compliment us on the Open. We had Braden Coburn on our last episode, and he also had mentioned that he liked the intro. So we'll keep it.
Isn't he a first-class gentleman?
absolutely.
He's the best. The 16 years skating in the National Hockey League, Braden Coburn, and now works with us at our anchor desk, also on a podcast of his own with Greg Wolf. Just a true gentleman. And he recently went heli-skiing in Alberta, or I think it was British Columbia, where you go up helicopter way up into the Canadian Rockies, and they drop you off, and then you ski your way down.
Oh wow.
He's a man's man, I'll tell you that, and conditioned to do it.
So going from Mr. Coburn to you, when we were getting ready for this interview, it was almost impossible to find a starting point because you have done so much throughout your career, from Alabama football, Vanderbilt before that, going to the Lightning, Magic games as well. But we want to start at the beginning. So even going to school for political science and English, what got you into the sports reporting world?
I would say my attraction to it came from my dad. We used to listen to games together, go to games together in Washington, D.C., where he was stationed as an Air Force officer at the Pentagon. We went to see teams that don't exist in a stadium that no longer exists. The Washington Redskins and the Washington Senators in baseball in RFK Stadium. The Redskins have been rebranded. The Senators are now the Texas Rangers, and RFK is coming down. But in the 60s, I thought it was a Taj Mahal. And I would listen to games on the radio. We would watch them on TV. I can remember watching Super Bowl I with him, which wasn't called the Super Bowl at the time. I can remember my first hockey game when NBC and CBS started televising those in the United States on Sundays. And so that is what turned me on. And I enjoyed it immensely. There's just the aura of the arena, the roar of the crowd. I can remember standing in RFK on a beautiful day in the spring, and the Chicago White Sox were in town for a doubleheader, and I looked around the stadium, and I'm a teenager. I'm a high school student, and I say, this is what I want to do. I want to be a part of this. I don't know exactly how, but I want to be a part of this, and maybe I can announce. And then my high school athletic director asked me if I wanted to do the public address at our high school. Oh, be still my heart. What a great opportunity that was. And I did that, and then went to college at Virginia Tech, which many of my friends from Northern Virginia were going, and that's the quick answer of how I got there. Big school at the time. And it didn't have a school of communications, but it had a campus radio, AM and FM, and it had a campus newspaper, and big football, big basketball, and I was in, and I was off and running.
That's
I hope
awesome.
that answers. That's what lit the fuse.
No, absolutely. And I totally understand it. I'm right there with you. You mentioned, you knew this exactly what you wanted to do, but you didn't know how you were going to do it. I share that sentiment. For me, it's always been I love the world of sports and we just want to cover it and fun any way we can, even though we can't, like I know me personally, I can't be on the field, but I know I want to be up there in the booth covering these games. So I love
Yes.
you share that same
Mhm.
sentiment from that perspective. Now I know I listened to your interview with Whit Watson on his show just a
What a
couple
great
a while
person he
ago.
is.
Fantastic. And you were talking about taking any opportunity you can get. So you mentioned the radio show and some of the things with the school. What were some of those first opportunities like for you that you got to do getting into the world of sports?
Well, I hosted the campus radio station shows, 3 hour shifts, and I had an opportunity my junior year to do the high school game of the week. There was a local AM and FM radio combination in Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Virginia, that uh, on radio, this is well before the internet and cable television, broadcast the high school game of the week on Friday nights. And we had uh, Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Floyd, Roanoke, Giles, New River. And they said, "How would you like to call these games?" And I said, "Really?" They said, "Yes, we can pay you $50 a week." And I was thrilled. And at the time I was spotting in the football, I went to the sports information office and they got me into the booth spotting and assisting broadcasters for college games on Saturday when Kentucky would come in or UVA or Texas A&M would come in. I could spot and help the broadcasters, Marty St. Louis and Don Lloyd, Marty Brenneman, and who's Hall of Fame Reds voice, and Don Lloyd do those games. And so I was able to get experience, get reps doing it. And if you can do high school football, you can do anything. And I say that because, at least to the competence level of Jake has the ball and he's tackled by Michael, and I got the names right. And the line of scrimmage is the 42 and he gains 6. It's second down. And keep giving the score. If you can be that competent, you are 80% ahead of the game, because you are going to have to, in high school football, gather all the information yourself. You're going to have to go to the coaches at these schools and get rosters. There are no sports information offices. You're going to have to repeatedly ask them, are there any corrections on this roster? So I don't call Michael Jake and Jake Michael. Have you switched? Have you lost a jersey? Did little Timmy forget to bring in his jersey? You gave him another one. And then create a information form that the players could fill out, that you might be able to use some of that in your broadcast. But you had to build all of that together, build your own spotting charts, and then study. But the higher you go up, or the larger the games get from high school, and there's still a great beauty to doing high school. If you talk to Whit, he loves doing it. We have done, James Bates and I did the high school football championships in the state of Florida. That was thrilling when you were playing, you were playing for a title, but you have to build that information. And then you go to major college and they have sports information offices. It gets more readily, the information is more readily available. I won't say it gets easier, because there's a lot of information you have to process, but to a sense it does. And then you go to the NFL, like I've been fortunate to do, and you could almost look at the field and know who many of those players were. Certainly not all of them, but you have a running head start. Whereas sometimes in college, and certainly in high school, you have never seen these players before we kick off. You haven't had 3 weeks to look at Christiansburg video against Radford or something, but you have seen 3 weeks of the Packers and the Lions.
So, with all of the different sports that you've done, I know you mentioned that high school football, if you could do that, you can do anything. What would you say is the most difficult in terms of getting everything right? Not necessarily at the level, but the sport itself.
I would say, and you visited with Rick Peckham, correct?
Correct.
Dave Randorf currently in that chair, and before Rick, it was John Kelly. I would say if you could do the National Hockey League exceptionally well, and in Tampa, the standard is extraordinarily high for how these games
Yeah.
are called. Dave Michigan and Phil Esposito, a Hall of Fame player, my hero. I had his poster in my high school locker. I don't know if you had posters in your high school locker. Maybe you can't tell me who you had in your high school locker, but I had Phil Esposito. And but Mish has been doing them here in Florida since he's a Yale graduate. He's been calling the Lightning game since 2002. Rick in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and now Dave Randorf, who is the finest play-by-play announcer in the NHL. He's extraordinary. He and Brian Engblom. If you can do that sport well, I think that is the greatest challenge. That, and I might think of, say, Formula One, or maybe even more so Grand Prix, where the field changes. NASCAR, the field changes by passing and whatever, and you're trying to maintain relativity to your storylines and who is leading the field and how that changes. But with hockey, you have 20 players, 18 of whom are moving in symphony all the time. And if you listen to Rick or if you listen to Dave Randorf, they're spot on every time. And you can't see the players necessarily by number. You have to recognize them by body type, situationally, and know it cold. You don't get two beats to say, that's Mikhail Sergachev or Eric Chernak. And they look a little bit alike if you only see their shoulders, and they're moving at warp speed. So you can make a case that would be that would require an intellectual level that's pretty impressive.
We've been very blessed to have both Rick Peckham and then Dave Randorf and Michigan on all the. We've had fantastic radio announcers for the Lightning, or just play-by-play announcers, I should say. But going from what's one of the most difficult, what do you think for you personally? What's one of your favorite sports to go out and cover?
That's interesting that you ask, because I asked my father one night at the dinner table, that Air Force officer, and he said, the sport that is in season, when it's hockey season, the push for the Stanley Cup, it's incredible. When the NFL at either opening day or it turns through the holidays into January and the games seem larger, we're headed toward the Super Bowl, the playoffs, one and done, bowl season in college football, golf on Sunday at Augusta, baseball in a World Series, every pitch. Have you listened to Joe Buck call the World Series? And which he did. He's called 30 World Series, I believe. And every pitch is, you hang on the edge of your seat. I've been fortunate to call Major League Baseball. In the summertime, there is a pastoral aspect to it. It's nice and easy in the summer, and it's warm. And the 2-2 pitch, it's green grass and laid back. But in October, it's anything but. Dave Roberts going to steal second base to keep Boston alive in 2004, and they'd rally from 3 down to overtake the Yankees. Moments for which you'll be remembered forever. So that's the Olympics. I love the Olympics for storytelling, and the Tour de France for storytelling. When I went to NFL Europe, and we did, when the NFL had a partnership with Fox, and we did 10 weeks, and all the players were allocated from NFL clubs in April, May, and June. And we had 6 teams in London, Edinburgh, Amsterdam, Barcelona, Frankfurt, Dusseldorf, and one in Berlin. When when we went there, our marching orders were, the best piece of advice was, like the Olympics, everybody has a reason to be here. It's not so important that he is thrown for 200 yards. Well, it's nice. Or he's rushed for 100 yards, which is nice. Tell me his backstory and how he ends up before 40,000 on an April night at Waldstadion in Frankfurt, Germany, playing Kurt Warner in the Amsterdam Admirals and at middle linebacker. Or how does Kurt Warner end up quarterbacking in the Amsterdam Admirals? Or all of that. Everybody had a reason they were there. So find that out. Why are they there? And like when you watch the Olympics, tell me about this person. I want to know Michael's backstory. I want to know what drives Jake before he dives into the water to race Michael Phelps to the wall. And when you know people in gymnastics or figure skating or downhill skiing, don't you feel a connection? And I do. And that's, so I hope I answered. Tennis, I've been fortunate to cover Wimbledon. The French Open I've been to. I didn't cover it, I went to it, which was amazing. The PGA Tour, LPGA. The aura of big events. There is something that is captivating, if not addictive, about that. And doing it at the very highest level, the very best. They're at the top of the pyramid, and we lose sight of that. The NBA, we lose sight of this. Every night they write down on the board, make it hard on Paola Banchero, 1. Make it hard on Cooch, 1. Make it hard on Point. Make it hard, right, on whomever, and they still perform. And that blows my mind that the best can still do it.
So we talk about the preparation of the players, but for you, moving to your typical day to day with the Lightning, what does your preparation look like for a game day?
Well, let me see if I got my briefcase here. Hold on. I got it. I start off and I make myself a punch list. It kind of looks like this. It's a list of things that I'm going to do and write down there the people that's going to be on my crew and what I'm going to do and all like that. And then I have a folder. In fact, I got 2, but I'll pull out 1. See if this is the right folder. Are you the right folder? I hope you are. I'll pull out. Yeah, here's my file folder for with all of this information. Here's from the 2 teams alone, right here. Here's my score sheet from the last game on top. And then this from Brian Burns, Chris Krenn, just Brian Briesman. There's 70 pages of this. And then NHL stats, another whole separate section. And then read read as much as you can, and then do line combinations. There are sites that you go online with this. And so we try to pump that through and into this. And on game day, our producer, Brad Bartle, we have at Bally Sports a 9 a.m. conference call where we probably have a dozen people on board. Dave Andrechuk, if he's doing the game that night, as he will be coming up. Dave Andrechuk, the Hall of Fame skater. Myself, Gabby Shirley, who does our sidelines. She's wonderful. Brian Ingblom, Dave Randorf, our producer, director, Doug Yulacki, a representative from the team, either Brian Briesman or Brian Burns, all to go through at 9 a.m. what we want to do in advance of the 10:30 morning skate. So we have about a 15, 20-minute conference call where we have set content for that night's show. And then we are at the arena by 10 o'clock. And we know where we're going. And the home team skates first. And after an hour, the visiting team will skate. We'll go in the locker room of both teams. Sometimes gather interviews, sound. We call it sound interviews. And by this time, it's midday. The format is printed. And see if I have a sheet on the format. Yeah, here's Well, this is just our post game. That's what a post game shoot looks like. All with my scribbled in during the course of the game, what we're going to talk about in post game. That is set by John Harrell, who does our pregame and our postgame. We call him Mule. Nobody works harder than him. USF grad, and the league stats. If you go on the NHL website, or you go on the Tampa Bay Lightning website, or you go on an infinite number of NHL websites, you can find all sorts of information, nuggets, data that'll kind of drive it. There's a site called Daily Faceoff, which is with reporters. You probably are very familiar with it. You get the latest line combinations, who's skating with who for both teams. So we'll know before that meeting who's skating with who, and then we will adjust our coverage based on who comes out in practice and if the combinations are different, or if they're different when they take the warm-up skate at 6:30 before a 7 o'clock game. So that's, in a thumbnail, pretty much what we do. And the game's over. We're off the air usually about 10:30, unless they're on the West Coast, which they're getting ready to go on the West Coast. And then we're heading home. So it goes from early in the morning until late at night. And that's one day of our preparation, and plus reading newspapers and wise Alec tweets that someone might send you, or some joke someone might send you. Can't use this. So, but it's funny, it's true, but we can't use this. So
that is amazing. All that information that you're going through, and that's a thick packet of stuff. How do you go through all that information and be able to whittle it down? Because obviously you can't talk about everything when you're on a show.
You got to prioritize it. You have to prioritize, but you want to be topic sensitive. And Steve Buck will help us during the game. Like when Nikita Kucherov had a 6-point night the other night. I texted him during the game. Steve, is that the second, third time? Isn't that the third time this has happened? He goes, yep. 6-point night by Kucherov. We had one in our very first trip to New York in 1992 by defenseman Doug Crossman. And then earlier this year, we had a 6-point night by Kuch. This was Braden Point's night. Braden Point just had it. And so it's only 3 times in history. So the communication is always flying around. And then we have a graphics operator named Rick Williams. And it's fascinating. He loads everything you see on the screen, like our names here, but all the other stats. He does so much research and does all of that. And then we have a lady, Kat Orr, that is our technical director with all the 1,000 buttons and doing the computers. We probably have 5 people on camera and 35 on the other side of the camera to make one telecast, from audio to camera people. The camera people, you can't fake hockey. Either you know it or you don't, and to a degree. It's also a sport, the more you know, the less you know. But, the camera people have to be experienced of where they're going with their camera shots and what they're hunting for, and crowd reaction shots, and look at the bench. And we're fortunate, too, that the coaching staff, the general manager, Julian Brisebois, John Cooper, can run right through them all. They are wonderful people, very professional and polite to deal with, and will help you as best they can. Not during the game, but, they'll come on. Hockey it might be the only sport, a little bit of the NBA, where players consider it a privilege, or they still talk to you between periods. They come on during the game to talk to you. They do a bit walking off at halftime. You'll see Dante Marchitelli with the Magic, if interview a player coming off the court, but we still get to talk to players during the course of the game, which is thrilling.
You mentioned it's the only sport where you get to do that with players in particular, but whether you were doing the sideline reporting or someone like Gabby Shirley who does that now, without asking formulaic questions, and they're very high strung because they had just gotten off the ice, what's the best method to get them to provide an answer that the audience will care about?
Keep your question as short as you can. Make it a true question, not a statement. And make it open-ended, where there's not the inclination to say yes or no. That was a great first period, wasn't it? Yes. Or as opposed to what went into that, you're leading 3-2, you don't have to say that, he knows it. What went into that first period? Were you surprised at the push back? Those kind of questions. What's most challenging in dealing with, name that player? How do you beat Sergei Bobrovsky? Where are the holes, right? And it's hardest when it's not going well. But again, short, succinct, and open-ended. And the NHL too, on occasion, a great star from another team will come on our show because our location for doing these interviews, the two locker rooms are close by. So you can get if you set it up before the game, you can get a Sidney Crosby, you can get an Alex Ovechkin, who's always been wonderful to talk to since he first came in the league. Spectacular people. And they'll talk to you during the game. And that's been our rule of thumb. And there's the PR representative will be there. There'll be a couple other people there, and if you're in the tunnel and you haven't seen all the action, Dave Randorf or Brian England might, and they know you haven't seen it, they'll suggest something. Ask him about the cross check. What happened, and how are you? Like in NASCAR, when I did. One summer I did some Motor Racing Network for NASCAR, Motor Racing Network in Daytona Beach. They had me in the pits. The question was usually talking to drivers after a collision or an engine problem, most often a collision. What happened? I'm here with Jake. Jake, what happened? He tells me. Can you get back in the race? How do you get back in the race? Okay, Jake, thanks. Back upstairs. Right? He's got to talk. And so that's the same way. You were leading by 12, and now you trail by 2. What turned this game? He's got to talk.
Well, you mentioned some of the amazing players that we have in the NHL, and I wanted to ask you, there's some clips of you on YouTube talking about the most underrated Bolt, and you mentioned Chris Gratton in that clip. So I wanted to kind of flip this question here, though, and ask
77 blue. I remember Chris.
Yes, correct. And then so I wanted to ask you this, though. What do you think is the most the best Bolt that we've ever seen? So going away from underrated, who is the best Lightning player that we've ever seen?
Well, you could say by records it would be Steven Stamkos, the captain, longest serving captain, owns all the scoring records. He's played for this team for 16 years. No one's played more games. No one scored more goals. No one has more points. A true citizen statesman, larger than life to that franchise, much in the model of Dave Andreychuk. I would say it would be Steven Stamkos. No one will ever wear 91 again. He arrived as an 18-year-old, seen Stamkos, the great campaign, and he has only been a man of honor for over a decade and a half. You have Marty St. Louis. See, we've been blessed since Marty arrived through now. The array of larger-than-life figures, Vinny LeCavalier, Brad Richards, Groton. Now Victor Hedman is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Andrei Vasilevsky, a first ballot Hall of Famer. Do you realize and I was looking this up, since in 2011, they went to Game 7 with Ben Bishop in goal. No, it wasn't Ben Bishop. It was Curtis McElhinney in goal against Boston. Not Curtis McElhinney. Refresh my memory here.
It was Dwayne Rollison.
Dwayne Rollison, thank you. Wonderful guy. They go to Game 7 against Boston. Boston never gets a single penalty called. Game 7 of the Eastern Conference. They were about to win the Stanley Cup. They were going to go to Vancouver. They would have beaten Vancouver. So that would have been Steven Stamkos' first cup. Since then, since John Cooper arrives, how many times have they been? I counted. They've won 2 Stanley Cups. They've been to the Stanley Cup final 2 other times without winning. They've been to the conference final 3 other times without winning. This is extraordinary. So what franchise wouldn't trade the world for that? Certainly Toronto would. That in the last, Coop's been here 11 years. So in that 11-year run, they have been at least to the conference final against Washington. Remember, we led 3-2 and never scored another goal.
Yep.
And Washington wins the cup. With Pittsburgh, led the series, could have won it. Those are the frustrating ones. You've won back-to-back Stanley Cups. So this has been the greatest, I call it the golden era of Florida sport, what they have done here. I look at this run, and it's unequaled in the National Hockey League in the modern era, what they have done. They could have won 3-4 other Stanley Cups in the last dozen years.
We want to go from the team back to you. So when you were on the block party with both Braden Coburn and Greg Wolf, you asked Braden Coburn if defensemen had a book of tendencies for certain guys. I want to ask you, what is your book of broadcasting partner tendencies look like?
Oh, I don't know that's a good question, but I don't know that I have them. Everybody is unique. Everyone has their own personality, but I think they're more similar than dissimilar. And professional sports, certainly. And that everybody tries as hard as they can. Everybody comes prepared. You give each other room. We say, give him room to talk. At Fox, they used to say, your job is not to analyze the game as the play-by-play announcer when I was doing all this college football, or I did the SEC Game of the Week for 15 years, calling that every Saturday. It is to set up your expert analyst and let him go. And you look at Dave Randorf, how skilled he is, and as expertly and descriptively and insightfully as he calls the game. Brian Engblom, who won 2 Stanley Cups with the fabled Montreal dynastic teams, with Ken Dryden and those, Bob Gainey under Scotty Bowman and what have you. He still has plenty of room to analyze and tell us exactly what's happening because he knows. He played over a decade in the National Hockey League. He knows. So you want to make room, set him up, and get out of his way. And we do communicate like what we'll call throws. I'm getting ready to come. When I come to you in the second segment, this is pretty much how I'm going to give it to you to tee it up, what you're going to talk about in your segment. So the other night, Dave Randorf and Brian were going to talk about goaltending. So I referred back to that morning skate where both coaches said the key to their success down the stretch is going to be goaltending. And that's how I teed it up with Dave. Dave, both coaches are saying the key to their this was the New York Rangers, Shesterkin and Vasilevsky with Tampa Bay. The key to the success for both teams heading down the stretch is going to be the quality of their goaltender. He said, right you are, Paul, and he was off and running with the points that he wanted to make and the points that Brian wanted to make. And so that's pretty much it. I know there's been a lot of stories, funny and true, where a play-by-play guy will nudge another one to hush up or something or let me have it, but I've never been around anything like that.
Recently, so we've talked about some of your play-by-play moments, and recently Bally had to deal with a power outage during the Lightning and Philadelphia Flyers game. And when Bally was able to get some power back, they had the NBC Philadelphia feed, but Dave and Brian weren't able to call the game. So you had to go back and do some play-by-play a little bit there. So I wanted to ask you about that. How was it calling a game in the studio like that versus calling all the games that you've called before?
Very different, but it's the old adage that you never know when something's going to happen in the blink of an eye that people will remember. But it was Dave and I looking at a monitor with no audio, and Dave Andrechuk had his laptop computer that we were actually looking at the anchor desk in the studio, trying to discern who these silhouettes are. And oh, looks to be Nick Paul just scored there, Andy. Not the greatest goal call. I do recall Emil Lilberg had teed up a shot from about 15 feet out, point blank. And I've always said, thank goodness it didn't go in. I would hate that to have been his first career goal was, oh, that looks like Emil Lilberg. What do you think, Dave? Yeah, it looks like him to me. So we were just trying to converse our way through it. But you never know when something's going to happen. Remember the earthquake in San Francisco, the earthquake series with Tim McCarver, the late great Tim McCarver and Al Michaels, right in the Oakland A's and San Francisco Giants. Who could predict that? Something happening that you're going to have, there's no way to be prepared for, but you're going to have to call it. And so we had one of those moments. We had all our notes in front of us. I don't know what good it did us, but we tried to get through it as best we could. And then it came back on. And Dave and Brian were trying to get through, but couldn't. They could see it, and the arena was dark. You heard the story about the clock being out there. There was no audio in the building. There was no music in the building. There were no electronic. The scoreboard was out. There was no time out. So the Lightning equipment staff went and gave the scores, the off-ice scores, their battery-operated clock for practice. It looks about this size, and they set it by the ice like this. It said 20 on it and hit a button. And that was the only clock in the building that was running and timing the game. And the guy sat there and stopped it like you'd hit pause for your alarm clock when you wanted to go in the morning. We were down to, today's the anniversary of Lord Stanley of Prestwick ordering a trophy for the Stanley Cup, which would become the Governor General of Canada. Today's the anniversary day for that. So you never know what that is going to inspire. We were back to the days of that over 120 years ago.
We got one final question before we do a recurring segment that we have here on the Bolt Report's Thunderstruck. The Lightning had a very surprisingly active trade deadline. They acquired Anthony Duclair. They acquired Matt Dumba. And with the way that they've been playing with victories over the New York Rangers and Florida Panthers, who are two of the best teams in the East, how do you see the Lightning finishing out their season for a team that has consistently, as we've remarked before, been excellent over the past 11 years in John Cooper's tenure?
Didn't Matt Dumba arrive in time for the Philadelphia game? Isn't that when they arrived, Matt Dumba and Duclair? They both came from the West Coast, and the team's headed out that way now. They've given the team clearly a spark, tongue-in-cheek, when Anthony Duclair scored he had a point in every game before last night against Florida, a few days ago against Florida. And I texted the Florida. He'd played in Florida, he had a 31-goal season there. He'd gone to the Stanley Cup final there. And I texted Jeff Wessel, the producer of Florida. I said, Matt Dumba is going to win the Hart Trophy as the MVP. You just watch. He's on a heater now, boy. And he didn't give me the courtesy of a reply. I just thought, I think he thinks I'm an idiot, and so he's getting along. The line is long, but I think they've provided a spark. We definitely needed help on the back end. Chernak being hurt as he has been And although it's good news with Mikhail Sergachev, one of the most interesting men in the world, he plays hockey. He has a graduate degree in finance. He speaks like 4 languages. Fascinating guy. But he's coming back from fractured leg surgery. They need help there, but Dumba certainly provided an edge. And they go from being out of the playoffs to now very much in the playoffs. Duclair does. And now Anthony Duclair skated on the number 1 line when the game began yesterday in Florida. How does a guy go from skating in San Jose and a team with the worst record in the West to skating on the number 1 line with Kucherov and Point in the blink of an eye? You just never know, huh? So what's the lesson? You just keep playing as hard as you can play, and the camera never blinks. The camera's always on. Somewhere, some general manager is going to see that, and it takes one person to change your life. So I think that trade, and we are a week into it, right? A whole week, maybe 2. Both those acquisitions by Julian Breesbaum, who has a history of wonderful acquisitions, when he was able to strengthen the roster through trades with New York. Remember what he did with New York? All the players that came down, J.T. Miller, and the like, Pat. I'm just going through that whole list of guys. Ryan Callahan is just phenomenal to help this roster.
Amazing stuff that he's been able to do. And we've been so fortunate as Lightning fans to get to see him do those. I was a little worried there for a little bit, the trade deadline, and then he goes out and gets Matt Dumba late and he's been fantastic for the Bolts. So it's been really nice to see those guys provide that great spark. So Michael kind of mentioned it. It's one of the things we've been doing with all of our guests coming on. We call it the Bolt Reports Lightning Minute. So just a couple of quick questions for you, just trying to get to know you more. Should be some fun. Are you ready to go?
Ready to go. Lock and loaded.
Let's do it as I lose access to my doc here. All right, here we go. First question. Favorite restaurant in Tampa?
Either the Columbia in the History Center right next door to the building or Hat Tricks.
Hat Tricks, that's a classic. Favorite activity to do when not covering the Lightning?
Run and read. My wife has run 45 marathons.
Wow.
I like to go.
Wow.
I like to go on game day runs with Dave Mishkin. So yeah, I like to run. And Brian Burns runs, Breesman runs, Tom Mulligan runs, the trainer. There you go. Great stress relief.
Everybody's out there running. I love that. Best Lightning game you ever gotten to watch?
Game 6, Calgary, Marty St. Louis, double overtime against Mika Kiprasov. Brian Bradley was my seatmate on the charter Air Canada up and back for 4 legs. We had to go up there twice. I had a middle seat and he had the aisle. I thought we were going to switch. We never did. And but I remember the cup was out. Commissioner Bettman is standing right here to me. The Conn Smythe has a piece of yellow IBM paper and it says Aginla. He's going to win the Conn Smythe. All Calgary has to do is score. And in double overtime, Marty scores. And I look down at our bench. They're roaring. The arena's just gone stunned. And I turn. Commissioner Bettman's gone. The cup is rolling down in its case. And 2 nights later, Brad Richards wins the Conn Smythe and Andy lifts the cup.
Absolutely unbelievable game for the Lightning. Favorite player you have interviewed?
Might be Stamkos because Steven, I don't want to say Stamkos. You never have heard an answer from Steven in the heat of a game that is not well thought of and could not be supported. As he must be exceedingly well read, but you always get a compelling answer. It's somewhat of an unfair question, not to put you on the spot, because there are 1,000 guys that we have talked to, but you always get. John Cooper will always pause. He's a lawyer by training, and he'll think it through. But you're right. I remember when Torch was here in a much younger time, and he would say, "Don't ask me about this or don't ask me about that." we're in the studio, and I'd say, okay, I won't before the game. Okay, I won't, coach. We go about the third, fourth question, and I circle back and I ask him that. And he'd give me that. He'd give me that look, but he'd answer the question. He was always nice. To this day, you saw he had to leave the game a little early the other night. But to this day, John Tortorella has always been absolutely wonderful to me.
Favorite road arena that you've been to?
I have the blessing, again, of coming into this league in 1992 when we did games out of Expo Hall, the prefabricated hut that is at the fairgrounds. But we played in the original Boston Garden, the original Montreal Forum, the original Toronto Maple Leaf Gardens, the original Chicago Stadium, the original LA Forum with Gretzky. I love LA. We got to see all the original buildings for the most part that no longer exist. I still get a thrill out of going into Madison Square Garden, walking up the ramp into the garden. Many players will tell you that they do. That might be as, other than our own. I think what Jeff Vinik has done with Amalie Arena and with all the surrounding real estate, the high rises, the Graduate School of Medicine, the residences, the hotels, he's transformed a city. That arena, he put $50 million, at least of his own money, into a public building in the arena. That's a fabulous building. He and Steve Griggs, the chief executive officer. But outside of Tampa, I still get a child's thrill out of going to Madison Square Garden.
That's a classic one. Tampa doesn't even look like a city I recognize anymore. I lived here my whole life, and I love it. It's fantastic. All right, last one. I think this one's my favorite. What's your favorite Tampa Bay Lightning jersey?
Well, I liked the first one. When I came in the league, that they were on occasion the Dave Andrewchuk jersey. I liked that very much. I remember being in the room when they were designing it, putting it together. Who thinks this? Who thinks white? I liked the one that they won the cups with. Hard to argue with that. And this is a politically very correct. But you know what? Usually third jerseys I just hate that. I like, you have one uniform, you wear one uniform. That's the Alabama in me. But I must say that I understand they are sold out, is the team, of this new third jersey with the three stripes and the circular emblem.
They're nice.
Tampa Bay Lightning, the black with the blue circle and the lightning bolt. Those are, and then the flat helmet. Those are beautiful. That is a great look. But if you had me pick one, and here's another thing, I wish the Lightning would wear white at home. So memo to the commissioner's office, Steve Mayer, who's extraordinary in staging all of the great events. I wish the owners and the general managers would consider that, because we wear our colors at home. We wear our navy blue or black. And every visiting team that comes in, the 31 other teams, wears white. They don't wear their colors. But if you wear white primary, you're going to see the red of Chicago, the blue of the Rangers. You're going to see, right, the green of the Minnesota Wild, the red of the Detroit Red Wings, the blue, blanc, rouge of Montreal, the black and gold of Pittsburgh, the orange of Philadelphia. You'll see that. Now you're getting primarily their white jerseys, and the home team is always for 41 games in blue. It's a blue and white game for the most part. I would like to see the colors come back.
I never thought about it like that, and that's a great point.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Well, that'll do it for us here in this one. A huge thanks to Paul Kennedy for coming on the show. Guys, if you like this video, make sure to hit that like button and make sure to hit subscribe as well so you don't miss out on future videos just like this one. We'll talk to you in the next one. Go Bolts.
Yeah, go Bolts.